Diablo is one of the biggest gaming franchises on Earth, raking in more than $666 million in just the first 5 days of its launch. I've personally always had an affinity for this franchise, and I'm old enough to have played Diablo 1 on my first ever laptop, which was an enormous chunky boy who weighed a ton and had a tiny, tiny little screen. When Diablo 2 came out, I got heavily addicted to it for a short time before discovering World of Warcraft in 2004 and going full no-life degen for the next 15 years. I did, however, find time to play Diablo 3 on its launch, and I basically meandered through the campaign and then quit when I finished. Based on my experience with Diablo, it conjures up themes of horror, gore, torture, isolation, hopelessness, and helplessness, and this feeling that no matter how hard you fought or how strong you became, the waves of demons were never ending and you were just prolonging the inevitable. And I loved it. That bleak and depressing world is one of my favorite places in all of gaming. So you can imagine how excited I was when this epic trailer dropped for Diablo 4 in 2019. Seriously, this has got to be one of the best cinematics from any game ever made. It was everything I had hoped for. The hopelessness, the helplessness, it was right there on display as the four men tried to hold back the demons. The gore and horror splashed across their faces as 4 became 3, as the only exit crashes close before their eyes and Elias reveals himself from the shadows. They realize they are alone. They are then tortured to death, having their entrails ripped from their body to open a gateway to hell and usher in the most iconic aspect of the Diablo franchise: the demons. It was really happening. This was going to be incredible. Diablo 4 was finally coming. Now, don't get me wrong, I really like Diablo 4. I've spent just over 200 hours playing it, and I have a level 100 barbarian and a few ults to show for it. There's a lot to love about Diablo 4. The combat is extremely fluid and satisfying, and it's probably the best the franchise has ever seen. Seriously, when you whirlwind on a barbarian, it will sometimes completely slice enemies in half, and it's one of the most satisfying things in any video game I've ever played. And the world in which all of this takes place is also probably the most beautiful I've seen in any ARPG, and the attention to detail is just kind of mind-blowing for a top-down game. It never once feels dead or sterile, and the events throughout the world are also pretty cool and varied, and when you're traversing through this overworld, you pretty much constantly find things to do, which can actually be kind of a problem for me. As I was trying to complete the main story, I would get distracted for like days at a time doing side content. But I think this is a great testament to how good the combat itself actually is. You just want to fight things because it feels so good. The story is also pretty good. It's not amazing, but it's interesting enough to keep most people entertained throughout their playthrough, and when it comes to the cinematics in the story, these are just S-tier godlike cinematics. Seriously, whoever wrote and directed these cutscenes needs to get their own TV show like yesterday, because this stuff is incredible. Overall, I think Diablo 4 is a great game. I think at over 200 hours, I've already got my money's worth out of the game, despite it being insanely expensive here in Australia, and I would recommend it to my friends. But there are a ton of things wrong with this game. As I played through the campaign, one of the first things I thought to myself was, where the hell is all the hell in this game? There is a section at the end of the campaign where you do go to hell for about 30 minutes, and it's the best part of the entire campaign, and it's the only time that I really felt immersed and excited by the game's story. But that 30-minute section is all you get. That's it. This is literally a game about the eternal conflict between heaven and hell, and yet we didn't see heaven at all, and there's not a single dungeon or event that takes you to hell. The demonic nature of Diablo is one of the reasons I adore the franchise so much. It's one of the reasons I also adore the Doom franchise so much. And it's not like Diablo doesn't have hordes of demons to kill, it's just that it doesn't feel very demonic. In fact, demons aren't even the major enemy type throughout the game. You'll spend most of your time fighting things like wraiths, goatmen, snakes and spiders, knights, priests, and a whole horde of other things that simply aren't demons. It's just a very weird design choice, and it's a little bit jarring thematically and aesthetically. I mean, I never once sat down to play Doom and asked myself where all the friggin' demons were. The second most obvious issue is that the game is clearly catered to a more casual RPG player. We're talking about the kind of person who can play an hour or two after work a few times a week, or on weekends with their friends, without falling behind in content progression or gear acquisition. And that's a good thing. I'm really happy that these games exist. But this leaves me really confused by the developers' choices to add in a bunch of game mechanics that are completely antithetical to this casual design choice. For example, how many people playing Diablo 4 know about stat buckets, or that certain mobs have significantly higher chances of dropping particular items, or that some skills have snapshot effects, meaning that whatever buffs and debuffs you have when you start channeling a spell continue until you stop channeling, regardless of whether they fall off your character. A good example of this is if you start whirlwinding outside of a suppressor's purple circle, when you move into it with whirlwind, you won't damage them because you started whirlwinding outside of the suppressor, and the suppressor recognizes your whirlwind as a ranged attack and they are immune to range attacks. And let's not forget drop rates on uber unique items that are so low that they virtually don't exist. The kinds of people who are playing Diablo 4 are for the most part either older gamers returning to the franchise or newer players that have been drawn in by Diablo's aggressive marketing. And by aggressive marketing, I mean Megan Fox's. Either way, the vast majority of these people don't have the time or desire to sit up late at night watching YouTube videos about how stat buckets work in order to min-max their character. So why then has the game been designed around a casual gameplay ideology and then had all of these internal machinations hidden from its players that leave most people dazed, confused, and having no idea what the hell gear they should even be wearing? And I'm not just pulling this out of my ass either. I played the game with people who had mostly never played ARPGs before, and they had absolutely no idea what to do when it came to figuring out what gear was better for their class. These people are a good sample of what represents most of the Diablo player base. Those of us who made it through the story into the endgame, which probably starts around levels 75 to 80 since nothing really changes at all after that, will know that there's just not enough of a carrot on a stick to keep most people playing Diablo 4's endgame. For example, nightmare dungeons don't drop better loot based on their difficulty. There's absolutely no purpose in doing a nightmare dungeon higher than tier 50, which is mental considering they scale all the way up to level 100. While you're doing those nightmare dungeons, you'll most likely be doing what I do and running past all the gems that drop because there's no gem tab and they quickly fill your inventory. Blizzard says they are going to implement a gem tab, but it's going to take until Season 2 to do this for reasons that are beyond the realm of human understanding. As you grind through these dungeons, you'll probably be so tired of sorting between ancestral and sacred items on the ground, despite it being the highest tier world and a level 50 nightmare dungeon, that you just don't bother to pick up anything that's not orange anymore. The upgrade materials are pointless anyway, since it's all maxed out by now, so they're not even worth salvaging, and I have more gold than I could ever possibly need. I'm willing to bet you're probably also skipping right past every single event because even while you were leveling, they were a waste of time with extremely lackluster rewards. You're probably getting frustrated by shitty dungeons that have the same 4 rotating objectives, crappy mechanics that one-shot you from off-screen since the game only lets you zoom out a maximum of 20 centimeters from your character's nutsack, and falling asleep at the wheel as you fight yet another boss with virtually no mechanics. And at this point, you're probably wondering, why am I even doing this? There's no real gear progression going on here. There's no armor sets to work towards or craft. Hell, even killing Uber Lilith doesn't drop better gear, so what's the point? Well, that's the secret. There isn't one. Which is a huge and unforgiving mistake for a company that has spent the last 20 years showing just how important endgame content is with World of Warcraft. Most people would present the argument that they're mostly focused on seasonal content, and so endgame content on Eternal Realms doesn't actually matter that much. But the patch notes for Season 1 came out on the day I made this video, and the TLDR is that literally everything in the game is now worse. This was probably the biggest kick in the face I've ever received from a gaming company, and I'm a person who was really excited for Overwatch 2's PvE content. You see, vulnerability damage has been nerfed by 40%. I think this actually makes sense on a fundamental level, because vulnerability is just way better than all of the other stats in Diablo 4, but this nerf causes 2 problems. The first is that vulnerability, despite this huge nerf, is still the best stat. This means that the problem Blizzard set out to fix hasn't actually been fixed. The second is that most people, including myself, built their entire gear set around vulnerability damage. We stacked those multipliers so that we could do good damage at endgame, and I can't speak to what that looks like for other people, but for me, just this vulnerability nerf is a 40% reduction in my character's power. We're talking about a character that I've just spent 200 plus hours leveling and gearing up. Now, regardless of whether you think this nerf to vulnerability is a good thing or a bad thing, it just feels really bad from a player perspective. And if you're a casual player who doesn't read guides and doesn't watch YouTube videos and you're already having a tough time with nightmare dungeons, this is going to push you over the edge. But the nerfs don't stop there. You see, Blizzard has also completely bent sorcerer players over a barrel by nerfing cooldown reductions by 30%. This is a stat that many sorcerer builds rely on in order to be playable. They also have not fixed resistances, which is the stat that Sorcerer and Necromancer main stats scale off. What this means is that Sorcerers and Necromancers are taking way more damage from non-physical sources than they should be. It would be like Barbarians' strength not increasing their armor, which reduces their physical damage taken. The short version is that Sorcerers and Necromancers are way squishier than they should be. We've also got a reduction in the core stat bonuses on weapons from 50% to 25%, reduction in critical strike damage by 17% across the board, and a further 50% critical strike damage reduction on swords, and a whole lot of incoming damage reduction nerfs by about 25%. When it comes to leveling up, you can also expect it to be significantly slower, with the bonus for killing monsters that are 3 levels higher than you being reduced from 25% to just 4.5%. The bonus experience you gain from entering higher tier worlds has also been absolutely gutted. Where previously a level 1 character entering a dungeon and having a friend kill level 100 monsters would have received the full level 100 monster XP times 1.25%, they'll now receive XP as if the monster were 10 levels above them times 1.15%. I haven't tested this out myself, but this seems to have essentially killed power leveling, which is confusing because Blizzard has power leveling items on the battle pass, but they don't want you to power level. Essentially, these patch notes boil down to 3 main points. You'll take way more damage, you'll deal way less damage and kill things slower, and when you do kill things, you'll be rewarded with way less experience than before. The only reason I can think of Blizzard doing this is that they want the seasonal content to take much longer to work through so that people don't progress too fast and they can draw out the seasonal content. But I think this is actually going to cause a lot of people to quit Diablo 4 because it feels like we're just being punished by Blizzard for playing their game. Other notable dogshit decisions they've made for Season 1 are not adding more storage tabs, not adding the gem tab, and a reduction in the chance to reroll stats, making enchanting far more expensive. Possibly the most annoying one to me, because I was going to play a Necromancer in Season 1, is that they haven't fixed Necro minion builds. They did add some small buffs to minions, but they also dramatically incentivized the sacrificing of minions with a new set of aspects. And since Bone Spear is still clearing Uber Lilith in under 5 minutes, the dream of a Necro pet build is officially dead. Blizzard, why do you hate your players? I think the reason for these absolute dogshit decisions is that Diablo 4 is having a serious identity crisis. It just doesn't know what it is or even what it wants to be. Earlier in the video, I talked about how Diablo 4 is designed for casual ARPG players and how I was confused by all the anti-casual systems they had in the game at launch. I'd hoped this would change, but Season 1 is just an extension of this confusing and annoying direction. And I think that's one of the main problems for Diablo 4. It's not hardcore enough for the people who have already made it to the endgame and are seasoned ARPG veterans from games like Path of Exile, but on the other hand, it's not casual enough for the audience it's aiming to attract and hold on to. Every new game experiences a huge drop in player counts after its first few weeks of release, but I think this has been made dramatically worse by Diablo's anti-casual systems, leaving a lot of players feeling like it's just not fun. And as Season 1 starts, this is a problem that's only going to get worse with all these nerfs. And this is a real shame because those first 50 levels of Diablo 4 are really, really great. I don't know, maybe this game needed to cook for another year or two to really flesh out the post-level 50 content, or maybe it's because Blizzard is trying to be greedy and capture both casual and hardcore players, and as a result, has ended up capturing neither. Either way, the game is in serious trouble, and as much as I want to continue playing, until Blizzard starts respecting its players a bit more and stops serving us plates of dog shit and trying to convince us it's caviar, I'm done with Diablo 4 and I won't be playing Season 1. Thank you for watching the video, guys. I really appreciate it. I'd also love to know what you think about Season 1, what you think about the changes and what your experience has been with this. So leave a comment. If you enjoyed the content, consider liking and subscribing to the channel. I've only just started this. I'm really trying to get off the ground. I'm also streaming on Twitch, and I do have a main YouTube channel where I talk about archaeology and history because I'm an archaeologist. So if you're interested in that stuff, check it out. It's in the description, and I'll see you on the next video.